Guys, there is a world quest that allows you to have carte blanche access to a C3 Serenade Favge Illuga, which is really, really interesting because for the longest time, well, pretty much since his pre-release information started to come out, I got the impression that he was basically worthless for anyone who isn't going to be a Zabai main as well. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be a Zabai main. I have no real interest in getting her at the present moment, but I am very interested in Lunar Crystallized damage, and I do like the kind of things that we can do with it. So having someone like Illuga, who is supposed to be like a Lunar Crystallized buffer, does seem really, really interesting to me. So obviously, with this big world quest that gives me carte blanche to his kit, then I just brought along a team that I would normally bring with Ningguang, Xilonen, Columbina, and Farina. And so when you have these 5 characters together, this of course becomes an Ascendant Gleam team, which is great because that will mean that the last person I think to use their skill, being in my case Ningguang, will be able to also further buff the amount of Lunar Crystallized damage that the team is able to do. Now, the interesting things about Illuga's kit is that he essentially gives the active character like a Yunjin buff for geo damage, which he gives like a small Yunjin buff, but then he also gives a Yunjin buff for Lunar Crystallized damage, which is a big buff. And apparently, according to the various spreadsheet impact players, the big buff matters, the small buff is completely worthless. Well, almost completely worthless. And so the question that has always been on my mind is whether or not the big buff can be applied to Lunar Crystallized damage, i.e. from the Lunar Crystallized turrets. So that got me sort of playing part of the world quest that involves a lot of fighting, that you can actually have infinite fighting as long as you don't actually complete the world quest. I have since completed the world quest, so that might have been a big mistake in my part, but either way, you can fight a lot of enemies. I probably should have actually tested a bunch of different teams instead of just the one team with Ningguang, but I'm just going to use what I know from what I've experienced. And yeah, you can see the kind of damage coming from your Lunar Crystallized turrets. You can see the kind of damage that is coming from the rest of the team, because Illuga not only has like a Yunjin buff for the active character, he also has like a crit value buff for geo damage, including Lunar Crystallized damage, I assume, for the entire team. So he has a couple of team buffs in there, as well as like an EM buff if you are in Ascendant Gleam, which this team is. I compared what I saw with this team to the same team, but if I just swap Farina out with Ino, and in this case it would have to be, well, C0 Serenade Ino with Sacrificial Greatsword rather. And that's because, well, it turns out Instructor doesn't work on Ino in a team like this. She's not triggering Lunar Crystallize in any way, shape or form. So, with that in mind, what I saw with my Ino team, and keep in mind this is C0 Ino, was upwards of somewhere between like 25 to like maybe 27,000, 28,000 damage coming from the Lunar Crystallized turrets. That's the only thing I was caring about. But when I had Illuga and Farina on the team, what I saw was upwards of 32,000 damage coming from the Lunar Crystallized turrets. It was kind of hovering between 28 and 32,000 damage. So I'm not entirely sure like what is driving it, but I just don't know for a fact if Illuga's quote-unquote Yunjin buff from his ult is actually what is accounting for what seems to be like a 10% damage increase, or potentially even a 15% damage in mental math. I don't know. I'll write it down on the screen, but it's like there are a few things that are factoring into it. The Yunjin buff, the crit damage increase that you actually get from his passive, the EM buff of 50 that you get from his passive as well. So it's not, obviously it's not just his Yunjin buff that is doing this, but at the same time, based on what I've heard about this buff, his Nightingale buff that he has from his ult, I kind of feel like it should have been higher. Like what I was seeing should be higher, but at the same time, I just don't know for a fact if he's like completely worthless or if he's actually fine in these kinds of teams that aren't Zabai related teams. Maybe when Zabai comes out, we can actually see a better representation of the actual difference between not having Illuga at C3 versus actually having Illuga at C3, because there are going to be the C6 Illuga players who will be able to actually show the real difference between having Illuga and not having Illuga, where if memory serves, his C6 is also like a crit damage buff of some description. Am I right? I am actually going to search it up in real time as part of this recording because I do not want to try and do this again. That's right, he actually gives an additional 10% crit rate and 30% crit damage, so that's actually a 50% CV increase as well on top of his already existing CV increase of, what is that, 10-20% already. So that actually becomes 70% crit value increase. That's actually a pretty nice buff from his passive and of course his C6 afterwards. But is that enough to, well, without the C6 anyway, the 20% crit value increase, which is 10% crit damage increase, is that enough to account for the increase in lunar crystallized turret damage as well as the EM, the 50 EM by the way, as opposed to what I'm seeing with Serenade Ino? I don't know. I guess the lunar crystallized reaction damage bonus coming from the Nightingale stacks, which there are, I can very easily get like all of the stacks I need, which is like, you start off with 21, you get 5 per Geoconstruct. This is Lunar Crystallized shenanigans, so you can very easily get 15. So if anything, you have, what is that, 46 stacks, and that's not something that immediately disappears thanks to Ningguang's massive amounts of damage hits that she could do. Even in AoE, there wasn't that many enemies, so I would imagine that some of the Lunar Crystallized turret hits are in fact taking in the Nightingale song stacks. I just don't know how the math is working out, whether I'm just not understanding the mechanics behind how Illuga is supposed to work. But he does seem to be increasing lunar crystallized turret damage. So maybe there's something going on here that I could maybe have a better idea about, maybe when Illuga actually comes out, that would give us a better idea of what's going on. I didn't script this video, I'm kind of just going off the seat of my fans. So let me know what you think. Obviously we have his entire kit available to read through and try and theorize, but like, based on what I'm seeing on the screen, could it also possibly be that the enemies that I was fighting are just a little bit more vulnerable to lunar crystallized damage? That could be a thing as well. I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you think about all of this. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.